All right, so we're looking at starting off with the idea of industrial America. So, the idea of early industrialization of America, and our big question is what are the results and impacts of industrial America? We talked earlier at the turn of the century, the U.S. was essentially an agrarian state, especially the way Jefferson wanted it. And so, as we see the industrial part of America change in the early 19th century, why and kind of what the big results could be of that issue. So transportation first. So transportation starts changing with the idea of roads. The first ever turnpike, if you will, or like actually made highway, funded highway, was 1790 Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Turnpike is basically a toll road. Okay, they actually went through, made the road, cleared it off through the forest. Otherwise, you try and take your wagon through dense forest on deer trails, those kind of things. Within 40 years of that, there are almost 2,400 miles of major road connecting most cities. Road that wouldn't be paved road, but it's a dirt road or a gravel road maybe. A road that actually can get you place to place. What's kind of funny is that back then, a road wasn't what a road is today. Also, the Cumberland Road is a national road, so actually a federally funded road that would start over here in Baltimore and then connect from the Cumberland, okay, all the way over here to St. Louis. Then you can then move goods back and forth across this road over here to the Atlantic Ocean. It's all about farmers getting goods. Remember, we have all these people moving out west here now, so we have these three distinct areas to try and connect. You have the north, industrial north, shipping north. You have the west, agriculture, and you have the south. Notice what area gets connected here? Yeah, it's just north and west. Okay. The wagons are even used already at this point. What's kind of funny is that they only cut trees off at about 3 feet high. They would cut them off there because that's how high the wagons could clear yet. And so, so the roads they're talking about weren't necessarily roads like we were talking today, but the idea you can get a wagon across like that and it would clear the stump. And so you only cut your trees off as you cut these roads, 2, 3 feet up, because you could clear that stump here in these kind of stone wagons. Obviously, they get more famous when they go out west across Mississippi into the Oregon Territory, but they started using these wagons early on. Those with bigger wheels and back here helps to get around the area. So people moving west here out to western Pennsylvania and so on and so forth throughout those areas. Now, besides roads, started building canals too. Canals were easier because think about it, what's easier? Walking or using a horse or floating down a river. And so canals became a big deal at this time. We saw the biggest one obviously being called the Erie Canal, which linked up Lake Erie here to the all the way over here down to the Hudson River, which then gave an outlet to the Atlantic Ocean. And so the Erie Canal, which took years to build, would allow you to link up to the west. You could take your goods, ship them on a boat across the Great Lakes, and then over to Buffalo, and again the Erie Canal all the way to the Hudson River, and then out to the rest of the world. There's other little canals here linking up too that kind of hook up to the Erie Canal. So the Erie Canal system, it took about 8 years to complete or so. Lots of money. Has a system of locks too. You could raise and lower the water with a system of locks, bridges for the roads, those kind of things. But it wasn't fancy. I mean, you would it's basically a barge if you're pulled by horses or went by the current. That'll change with the Clermont. Robert Fulton was an American inventor. Took the English idea of the steam engine and stuck it in a boat. So he's one of the guys we talked about in that whole Ogden v. Gibbons case out of New York, where he had the idea of steamships. Now, the benefit of steamship is very simple. With the motor running, that you can then run against the current. And as long as you ship goods not only downstream, but upstream as well, and makes the whole transportation issue a lot easier. So now, by 1840, you have the Erie Canal here, but you have this entire west here connected by canals. You go canals this way up to Lake Erie, and then this way out past the Erie Canal out to the Atlantic Ocean. You have canals connecting here out to Washington, D.C., canals connecting all the way down here to Baltimore. Huge deal. Lets you get your goods and crops from the west out to the Atlantic. Now notice, do you see anything down here by the south? Technically they shouldn't need it because they can just take things out of Virginia and Charleston, but still you're not really seeing a lot of links here to the south this time. To look at rates of inland freight, now this is how much it cost to ship your goods. Early on, all we have is wagon rates. How much it costs to send stuff per ton per mile for a wagon rate? And by the time we get to 1830s, 1820s, it drops this low because you have things like canal, you have things like those kind of things actually let you survive. And eventually, get even better when you have the railroad, which comes in later on. You go to your clipper ships. Clipper ships have this unique sail arrangement, these angled sails here. which allowed much faster speed and could sail against the wind. And so clipper ships were only used on the oceans; they're also used on the Great Lakes. There's actually a ton of clipper ships on the very bottom of Lake Michigan. Excuse me, in the chain of Great Lakes. And so these clipper ships are used to get goods back and forth at a very rapid pace, and also used from coast to coast at a very rapid pace. So it helps slow down or speed up, excuse me, the whole idea of transportation, how fast goods can get from where they're being grown to the market. Now, obviously, things start changing more here. We had what we call the Iron Horse in 1830s, being the first ever U.S. locomotive. It doesn't look like much when it starts out. Britain has locomotives at this point already, too, but they actually had to prove its worth against a horse to prove that, this machine was better than the horse they were using. So looking at this here, by 1830, we have 13 miles of track. The Baltimore, Ohio Railroad, two cities, right? By 1850, there are 9,000 miles of track. And by 1860, 31,000 miles of railroad track. Railroads were going to be linking the country in the 19th century. Plain and simple. You link every single little city up, goods get trained back and forth very, very easily. Here's the thing, though. What area do you think is not linked by railroad? Oh, that would be the South. See where most of the railroads are here. You have Chicago being a big hub. You have Pittsburgh being a big hub. These become your industrial centers of the world. All here to New York and Boston, so on and so forth. In the South down here, there's very little road. You have one or two lines running out of New Orleans, one or two lines running to Savannah and Charleston, and maybe to D.C. and Richmond, but that's about it. Notice how this area here lacks that area of railroads. That is definitely a more of a sectionalist idea of what kind of transportation is needed. And a lot of times the government just gave land away for railroads to make sure it happened. Now you have immigrant labor. We're talking immigration in this time period after Thanksgiving probably, but you're looking at who built these things. In the South, it was slave labor, but you also can't take slaves away from doing things like cotton, that kind of stuff. In the North here, it was all about the immigrants who were building railroads, especially the Irish, those kind of immigrants. Now, we always new inventions come up this time too. New inventions, new ideas that help the U.S. Become more of an industrial power. And so understand that America will try anything. We first were copying everything the British did. We would steal British ideas and copy them. But then we started doing ideas like, hey, we'll figure our own stuff out. And the idea of patents is really important here. Patents are what the government has to collect and reserve the inventions. In 1800, there's 41 patents. 1860, there's 4,300 patents. New stuff is made here in the United States. Kind of a big deal when you think about it. Also, innovation is driving new inventions, new factories, those kind of things, and make the United States more of an industrial power. Things like the cotton gin by Eli Whitney. By the way, he didn't invent it, done by a slave. We talk about leading to more slavery, but you can clean cotton faster, produce more cotton at a quicker rate, and drop that price of cotton. Actually, he was more popular for interchangeable parts. The idea you can make a good that you can take one part of it and stick it into another one. Typically, before this, there's an actual job called fitter. The idea of a fitter, your job was to take the thing that needed to be fixed, find a part, and literally fit it in there and try and make it work. Not really all that great of an idea when you think about it. I mean, prior to this, every single thing out there is made one of a kind. And if it breaks, you have to try and find a way to fix it. Now we make every single thing the same. You can take parts of one thing, add to another thing. It seems common sense today, but back then it was a huge deal, especially Eli Whitney's gun factory where he had interchangeable parts. Oliver Evans did some of the first locomotives. A steam carriage, as he called it, a way to actually run a vehicle, a car, or train, if you will, using a steam engine. He also used engines in factories. That way, instead of having to put your factory on a river, you have the paddle wheel drive everything for water power. You have your steam engine in the basement, then drives your factory and put it wherever you want to. So he was also a huge person to bring up those ideas in terms of how to innovate and make a better industry here in the United States. John Deere was not originally a tractor company. It was originally all about the plow. They had iron plows back then that when they went through the hard sod of the western areas, the plows would literally just break because the ground was so thick. By using steel and using a kind of a wedge design that he put together to break up that ground and allow people to plant in areas like Illinois and Wisconsin, and then eventually the Great Plains over the Mississippi. Also, if you plant stuff, you got to be able to collect it too. Mechanical reaper done by Cyrus McCormick in 1831. He used to take, 10 guys all day to clear a couple acres of grain by hand. Now this machine, you could do 10 acres a day with one machine. The idea you can do so much more with so less people was a big deal for farmers. Now, obviously, as you're producing more, what happens to farm crop prices? They go down. So we start seeing that economics part play a role here as you produce more and more stuff because you have new machinery, prices go down. Telegraph and communication, the idea of industry and stock markets, those kind of things. You can transmit information across the country now through the dots and dashes. Was a huge issue for the country and lining up those ideas. And also be able to send this stuff across the Atlantic Ocean. Cyrus Field made a transatlantic cable about this big around that you can send a message across the Atlantic Ocean and lay at the bottom of the ocean. And you can now you have now almost instantaneous communication with Europe was exist before that. The sewing machine. No more sewing clothes by hand. You can't imagine sewing clothes by hand anymore. But then you have a sewing machine turned by a crank. You now make clothes at a quicker rate. Less people needed. See where I'm going here, all that kind of stuff, okay? Think about the American dream, guys, okay? They all, as immigrants start coming here, we'll talk about immigration later on, but they all regard material advance as a natural for American republicanism and prove the country's virtue and promise. The idea we're making new stuff made us a good country. Frederick Leist observed that anything new is quickly introduced here, including all the latest inventions. There's no clinging to the old ways. The movement in America, the moment America hears the word invention, he pricks up his ears. The idea that America's all about new things this time. We're trying to create new stuff. The idea of tradition, those kind of things, was kind of being thrown out the window a little bit. We're willing to destroy what we have to get new things, make it new, make it better, that kind of stuff. The northern area was really our big economic area. You kind of see this idea of boom and bust. You have really, really good times, really bad times. Good times, bad times. Good times, bad times. And they all kind of goes with what's happening. So you have, maritime commerce, prosperity, Embargo Act. You have, things getting trade better, War of 1812. Post-war prosperity, post-war depression. Era good feelings, bank credit loans, all those kind of things happen. And that was, a big part of it, okay? Obviously, as these things get different, education costs more because you need people to run these businesses, and people need to be educated, run the business, do the accounting, all that kind of stuff. I love this. Tuition at Harvard was $24 a year in 1790. By 1860, it was $104, and people were freaking out about it. And the idea that, you have this, you need these skills that are available. Also, government really did a lot of protective industry. I mean, a lot of times Supreme Court ruled in favor of industry. For example, what industry can do. Gibbons v. Ogden, the idea that you can get a national patent. McCulloch v. Maryland, that states can't tax the federal government. All that kind of stuff plays a role in terms of helping out the business, have a national idea, making it work. New York passed a general corporation law saying how you can combine businesses. Technically, you would say the government had a laissez-faire attitude. It didn't really touch business, kind of let it do its own thing. But looking at the Supreme Court rulings, a lot of stuff happened here to help governments pass and be more industry at this time. Now, with all this idea of new industry coming out, you have what's called distribution of wealth. You have most of the wealth in the top 10% of the population, but it is like 75% is the top 10%, so whatever. In the city, it's a lot different. In Boston and Philadelphia, the top 1 or 4% own, half the stuff. So we started having this idea of wage gap already happening between the owners of the factories and those who work there. Insert your communist reference here. You can see by the population wealth in terms of, what income they shared, you really couldn't share much. I mean, it kind of starts out a little bit, and then we're going to kind of drop down here and stay very, very close together as we go back to the current day. You didn't have a huge amount of income share happening in terms of this. Samuel Slater really done the idea of the modern day factory. That you can have every single thing underneath one roof. And the Lowell Mills, Francis Cabot Lowell, kind of started doing the first ever mill towns in 1814. In fact, he owned the whole city. People worked, people lived, and you could all live there. He did textile mills in Lowell. So here's some examples of the Lowell Mill. His whole idea was that you had people working in the factories, you spun the thread, you weaved the cloth, made the clothes out of the cloth, all kinds of stuff in one location. Here you see the early looms, a very dangerous job. You get stuff caught there pretty easily. You can see where the biggest textile areas are. It was all in the northeast. Areas like Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island. Those kind of places were all about textiles. And you literally had most of that. Now, think about where's the cotton coming from? Cotton's coming from down here, but all the stuff's being made up here and then shipped back. And so I think it's kind of a big deal for some that the North was prospering off of the South. I mean, we started for Lowell. You work for very, very little money. A lot of times, girls were their main employees, young, from farm families.